The phone screams at 3:17 a.m., cutting through the bourbon-soaked silence of my apartment like a fire alarm in a funeral home. I've been staring at the ceiling for 2 hours, listening to the radiator clank its familiar rhythm of loneliness, so the call doesn't startle me as much as it should. Nothing startles me much anymore. 23 years of police work and 15 more as a private investigator will do that to a man's nervous system. Marshall. My voice sounds like gravel in a cement mixer, courtesy of too many cigarettes and not enough conversation with living people. Mr. Marshall, this is Dorothy Weimer. I'm sorry to call so late, but... The woman's voice breaks like china hitting concrete. My grandson is missing. I sit up, the familiar weight of other people's emergencies settling on my shoulders like a wet coat. How long has he been gone, Mrs. Weimer? Since yesterday afternoon. Timmy, he's 8, disappeared from Little Sprouts daycare around 3 p.m. The police... She pauses, and I hear the sound of tissues being pulled from a box. They think his father took him. Parents divorced? Custody battle. It's been ugly, Mr. Marshall. Really ugly. But Jacob wouldn't... Another pause, longer this time. Actually, maybe he would. I don't know anything anymore. I'm already reaching for my coat, muscle memory from 3 decades of middle-of-the-night catastrophes. Where are you now, Mrs. Weimer? At the daycare. There's a little girl here, the teacher's daughter. She says she saw what happened, but the police... Dorothy's voice drops to a whisper. They think she's making it up. But Mr. Marshall, this child, she hears things other people miss. Something in her tone makes my skin prickle. Not fear exactly, but that particular brand of awe that comes from witnessing something that doesn't fit into neat categories of possible and impossible. What kind of things? She knew my husband was a smoker just from hearing him clear his throat on the phone. Knew I was wearing my late mother's perfume. Knew the mailman was lying about his back injury. Dorothy's breathing grows shallow. She says she heard the man who took Timmy, and there's something wrong with his voice. I check my watch. 3:21 a.m. The witching hour, when the normal world sleeps and the strange things creep out to play. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to Little Sprouts takes me through the belly of Mill Brook, a town that peaked in the 1980s and has been sliding downhill ever since. Empty storefronts line Main Street like missing teeth, and the streetlights cast everything in the sickly yellow glow of a crime scene photo. I've worked 17 missing child cases in my career, found 14 of them alive, 2 in shallow graves, and 1 who just vanished into the statistical ether where lost children go when the world stops looking. I don't think about the one I never found. At least I try not to. Little Sprouts. Daycare squats behind a chain-link fence like a colorful prison, all primary colors and cheerful murals that look sinister in the pre-dawn darkness. 2 police cruisers sit in the parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the building in patriotic strokes of official futility. Through the windows, I can see figures moving around inside, the ritual dance of evidence collection and witness interviews that usually leads nowhere useful. Detective Lisa Chen meets me at the door, her expression carrying the particular exhaustion that comes from dealing with family court drama at 3 a.m. We've worked together before, back when I wore a badge and believed the system served something more than its own perpetuation. Ray! She nods toward the interior. Messy one. 8-year-old Tommy Weimer, divorced parents, ugly custody battle. Father's got a flight to Toronto booked for tomorrow. Today, I guess. Mother's been fighting the court order. Any evidence the father actually took him? Security footage shows a man in dark clothing leading the kid away around 3:15 p.m. Face obscured, but the height and build matched Jacob Weimer. Chen pulls out her notepad, flipping to a page covered in precise handwriting. Only witness is a 10-year-old girl named Lila Cross, daughter of one of the teachers. What does she say? Chen's expression shifts slightly, the way cops' faces change when they're about to discuss something that doesn't fit into their training manual. That's the weird part. She insists the voice was wrong somehow. Keeps saying it was a man trying to sound like a different man, or maybe a woman trying to sound like a man. Kids got some kind of thing with voices. I follow Chen inside, where the daycare's bright decorations look garish under fluorescent lights. Alphabet posters and finger paintings create a backdrop of forced cheerfulness that makes the current situation feel even more surreal. Near the reading corner, a small girl sits cross-legged on a rainbow rug, her dark hair falling in waves around a face that seems too serious for 10 years old. "That's Lila," Chen whispers. "Been giving us detailed voice analyses all night. Her mother swears the kid's always been able to do this, but you know how it is with families and missing children. People start believing in miracles. I approach slowly, the way you might approach a deer in a clearing. Not because I think she'll run, but because something about her stillness suggests she's processing information on frequencies most people can't hear. She looks up as I near, and her eyes have that particular clarity that comes from seeing the world without the filters adults use to make sense of chaos. "You're the detective Mrs. Weimer called," she says before I introduce myself. It's not a question. Your voice on the phone? You carry sadness in the low registers, like my dad did after the accident. The observation hits me sideways, unexpected and unnervingly accurate. "I'm Ray Marshall. I hear you might be able to help find Tommy." Lila studies my face with the intensity of someone reading sheet music. "Most people think I'm making it up. The police lady thinks I have an overactive imagination." She makes air quotes around the last two words, and I catch a glimpse of the lonely intelligence that sets certain children apart from their peers. "What do you think?" "I think voices tell the truth even when words lie." She gestures toward a tablet propped on a small table beside her. "Want to hear what I heard?" The recording is grainy security footage audio, mostly background noise and the distant sounds of children playing. But there, at the 3:14 mark, a low male voice says, "Come on, buddy. Time to go see Daddy." "Play it again," I tell her. Lila manipulates the tablet with the ease of someone who's grown up with technology as a native language. This time I listen differently, trying to hear what she hears instead of what I expect to hear. "The words are right," she says quietly, "but the voice is performing, like when actors try to sound like real people, but they're thinking too hard about it." She looks up at me with those eerily perceptive eyes. "My mom used to read me bedtime stories in different voices for all the characters. This sounds like that, someone playing a part." I lean back, processing the implications. Voice analysis isn't uncommon in police work, but it usually requires expensive equipment and trained specialists. Having a 10-year-old provide the same service using nothing but her ears feels like stepping into a world where the rules I understand no longer apply. "Lila," I say carefully, "how long have you been able to do this?" "Always." She shrugs, as if the question doesn't make much sense. "My mom says I was correcting people's accents before I could walk properly. I can hear when people are sick, when they're lying, when they're scared." Her voice drops to a whisper. "When they're thinking about hurting someone." A chill runs down my spine that has nothing to do with the building's air conditioning. "And the person who took Tommy?" "Scared, really scared, and—" She pauses, tilting her head as if listening to something I can't hear. "Desperate, like when someone's drowning and they grab onto anything, even if it hurts the person trying to save them. Before I can respond, the daycare door bursts open and a man in an expensive suit strides in, trailed by a woman in police uniform who looks like she's been arguing with him for several blocks. The man has the kind of aggressive confidence that money and law degrees provide, and his eyes scan the room until they lock onto Lila. "Detective Chen," he says without taking his gaze off the girl. "I'm attorney Marcus Webb, representing the Weimer family in their custody proceedings. I understand you've been allowing a minor to provide testimony without proper psychological evaluation or parental consent protocols." Chen's jaw tightens. "Mr. Webb, this is an active investigation involving a child witness whose claims appear to be based on alleged psychic abilities rather than observable facts." Webb approaches Lila with the predatory grace of someone who makes his living discrediting inconvenient witnesses. "Young lady, I'm sure you want to help find Tommy, but sometimes our imaginations can make us think we've seen or heard things that aren't really there." Lila looks up at him with that unsettling directness, and I watch her face change subtly as she processes whatever information his voice is providing. "You're afraid," she says quietly. "Really afraid. Your voice is doing that thing where it gets tight when people are trying not to panic." She tilts her head slightly. "You know something about Tommy that you don't want anyone else to know?" Webb's confident expression falters for just a moment. So brief it might have been imagination, but Lila catches it. She always catches it. "What kind of something?" I ask, stepping closer to Webb. "This is ridiculous," Webb blusters, but his voice has indeed gotten tight, higher than it was moments before. "I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated by a child with obvious psychological—" "Mr. Webb." Lila's voice cuts through his protest like a tuning fork through noise. "When you said Tommy's name just now, your voice changed. The way people's voices change when they feel guilty about something." The room falls silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic beginning to build as the city wakes up. Webb stares at Lila with the expression of someone who's just watched a card trick that violated the laws of physics. "I think," I say slowly, "we need to have a longer conversation about Tommy Weimer's custody case." Webb's phone buzzes, and he glances at it with relief that suggests salvation arriving just in time. "I'm afraid I have another appointment, but I strongly advise against placing any investigative weight on the fantasies of a disturbed child." He leaves as abruptly as he arrived, but not before I catch Lila's expression as she watches him go. She looks troubled in a way that has nothing to do with his insults and everything to do with whatever her extraordinary ears picked up from his voice. "What did you hear?" I ask after the door closes. "Lies," she says simply, "but not about what you think. He's not lying about being a lawyer or representing the family. He's lying about—" She pauses, struggling to put complex auditory information into words. "About caring whether Tommy gets found or not." Chen rejoins us, her expression grim. "That was interesting. Webb's been pushing hard for an emergency custody hearing to finalize Jacob Weimer's petition. Says the mother's instability makes her a flight risk." "What kind of instability?" "Depression, mostly. Lost her job 6 months ago. Been in therapy. Jacob's claiming she's had threats about taking Tommy and disappearing." Chen checks her notes. "Hearing scheduled for Friday, 2 days from now." I look at Lila, who's returned to studying the audio recording with the focused attention of someone solving a complex puzzle. "Any chance Jacob actually did take his own son?" 50-50, Chen admits. "He's got motive, opportunity, and a plane ticket to a non-extradition-friendly jurisdiction. But his alibi checks out. Security cameras show him in his office building until 4 p.m., and it's a 30-minute drive from there to here." "Unless he hired someone." "Or," Lila says without looking up from the tablet, unless the person who took Tommy isn't really a man at all. The observation hangs in the air like smoke from a fire that hasn't been discovered yet. I've learned not to dismiss the impossible when it comes from people who see the world differently than the rest of us. Sometimes the impossible is just the truth wearing a disguise. "Play the recording again," I tell her. "This time, tell me everything you hear." Lila manipulates the controls, and the scratchy audio fills the quiet daycare again. This time, she narrates what her ears are telling her. The voice starts too low, like someone trying to sound bigger than they are. The breathing is wrong, too controlled, like actors do in voice class. And there, at the end when he says, "Daddy," the pitch shifts up just a little. The way women's voices do when they're trying to sound masculine, but they forget to maintain the lower register. She stops the recording and looks up at me with those ancient eyes in her child's face. "It's a woman, Mr. Marshall. A woman who practiced sounding like a man, but couldn't quite pull it off when she got nervous." Chen and I exchange glances, both of us doing the same mental calculation. If the kidnapper is a woman, Jacob Weimer's alibi becomes irrelevant, and the suspect pool expands to include anyone with access to Tommy and motivation to take him, including his mother. "Lila," I say carefully, "I need you to listen to some other voices. Can you do that?" She nods, but I catch a flicker of something that might be fear or exhaustion. Reading voices the way she does is clearly more than just a party trick. It takes concentration and energy, and she's been at it for hours. "Just a few more," I promise. "Then you can rest." Chen pulls out her phone and scrolls through audio files until she finds what she's looking for. "This is Jacob Weimer's interview from yesterday evening." Jacob's voice is tired, stressed, but fundamentally honest as he explains his whereabouts and denies any involvement in his son's disappearance. Lila listens with her head tilted, processing nuances that would escape even trained interrogators. "He's telling the truth about not taking Tommy," she says when the recording ends. "But he's lying about something else, something that makes him feel guilty, ashamed." She looks up at me. "He knows something that would help find Tommy, but he's more afraid of getting in trouble than he is of his son being missing." Chen's expression darkens. "What could be more important than finding your kid?" "Money," I suggest, thinking about Webb's aggressive representation and Jacob's planned flight to Toronto. "Or freedom, maybe both." Chen's phone buzzes with a text, and her expression shifts to something between relief and apprehension. "Sarah Weimer just agreed to come in for another interview. Should be here in 20 minutes. "Good. We'll need Lila to listen to her voice, too." But when I look around for the girl, she's disappeared. I find her in the bathroom, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall and her hands pressed over her ears. She's not crying, but her face has gone pale in a way that suggests she's reached some kind of limit. "Too many voices," she whispers when she sees me. "Sometimes they all start talking at once and I can't make them stop." I sit down across from her, recognizing the exhaustion that comes from having gifts that feel more like curses. "How long has this been happening?" "Since my dad died 3 years ago." She looks up at me with eyes that hold too much knowledge for someone who should be worried about homework and playground politics. "He was in a car accident, but the other driver lied to the police about what happened." I could hear the lie in his voice when they interviewed him on TV, but no one believed me because I was just a little kid. The story hits too close to home, stirring memories I've spent 15 years trying to bury. My own daughter, Emma, was 7 when she died in a car accident that was ruled driver error. My error for letting my ex-wife drive her to school in weather I should have known was too dangerous. No amount of investigation or second-guessing could bring her back, but I've spent every day since trying to save someone else's child from someone else's tragedy. Sometimes, I tell Lila, the hardest part about hearing the truth is that other people aren't ready to listen. She studies my face with that unnerving perceptiveness. You lost someone too, a little girl. I can hear it in your voice when you talk to me. The way people sound when they're trying to protect something that's already gone. The observation cuts deeper than it should, but before I can respond, Chen appears in the bathroom doorway. "Sarah Weimer's here," she says, "and she brought her own lawyer." We return to the main room, where a woman in her 30s sits at the child-sized table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that's probably gone cold. Sarah Weimer has the hollow-eyed look of someone who's been surviving on crisis adrenaline for too long, and her clothes suggest she dressed hastily. Mismatched socks visible above sneakers that don't match her professional blazer. Beside her sits a woman in an immaculate business suit, tablet in hand and expression radiating the kind of controlled aggression that expensive legal representation provides. She introduces herself as Amanda Cross, no relation to Lila, despite the shared surname, and makes it clear that her client will be answering questions under protest and with careful limitations. "Mrs. Weimer," Chen begins, "we appreciate you coming in. We just have a few follow-up questions about yesterday afternoon." Sarah's voice, when she speaks, carries the tremor of someone operating on the edge of complete breakdown. She recounts her whereabouts during the time Tommy disappeared, at work at Millbrook General Hospital, where she works as a registered nurse. Her supervisor confirms she was on duty until 6 p.m., well after the kidnapping occurred. I watch Lila as Sarah speaks, noting how the girl's expression grows increasingly troubled. When Sarah finishes her statement, I lean over to Lila and whisper, "What do you hear? Truth about where she was?" Lila whispers back, "But lies about—" She pauses, her face scrunching in concentration. "About being surprised that Tommy's gone. She's sad and scared, but not surprised, like she knew something bad was going to happen." Sarah's lawyer intercepts before I can ask follow-up questions. "My client has been fully cooperative and has provided all relevant information. Unless you have specific evidence—" "We do, actually," I interrupt, pulling out my phone. "We have audio evidence suggesting Tommy's kidnapper was a woman disguising her voice as a man. The effect is immediate and telling." Sarah's already pale face goes chalk white, and her hands begin to shake badly enough that she has to set down her coffee cup. Her lawyer maintains professional composure, but I catch her glancing at her client with new concern. That's impossible," Sarah stammers. "The security footage shows someone dressed as a man," I correct. "But voices don't lie the way appearances do." Lila tugs on my sleeve and I lean down so she can whisper in my ear. She's really scared now. Her voice is doing that thing where people's breathing changes when they realize they're caught. "Mrs. Weimer," I continue, "would you be willing to provide a voice sample for comparison with our evidence?" The lawyer immediately objects, but Sarah surprises everyone by nodding. Yes, of course. I want to help find Tommy however I can." Chen sets up a recording app on her phone and asks Sarah to read a brief statement. As Sarah speaks, I watch Lila's face transform from concentration to confusion to something that might be realization or might be horror. When the recording ends, Lila looks up at me with those two knowing eyes and whispers, "It's her. She's the one who took Tommy." The accusation hits the room like a bomb in a library. Sarah's lawyer immediately goes into damage control mode, demanding evidence and threatening legal action, while Sarah herself just sits there staring at Lila with an expression I can't quite read. "That's impossible," the lawyer insists. "My client was at work when the kidnapping occurred." "Until 6 p.m., I point out. "Tommy disappeared at 3:15. "She was on duty. Nurse schedules have breaks," Chen interrupts, consulting her notes. "Lunch breaks, smoke breaks, personal time. Plenty of opportunity to leave the hospital, drive to the daycare, and return before end of shift. But Sarah doesn't deny it. Instead, she looks at Lila with something that might be respect or might be resignation. "How did you know?" Her lawyer grabs her arm. "Sarah, don't say anything." "She knew." Sarah's voice has changed, becoming stronger and more focused than it's been all night. "This little girl heard through my disguise when the police couldn't, when the security cameras couldn't, when everyone else just saw what I wanted them to see." "Mrs. Weimer," I say carefully, "where is Tommy now?" The question hangs in the air like a sword suspended by thread. Sarah looks around the room, at Chen with her police authority, at her lawyer with her legal protections, at me with my decades of experience dealing with family crises, and finally at Lila with her impossible gift for hearing truth. "Safe," she says finally. "He's safe." "Where?" "Somewhere Jacob can't take him away from me." Her voice gains strength as she speaks, the tremor replaced by fierce maternal determination. "Somewhere the court can't hand him over to a man who's been planning to disappear with him since the day our divorce was finalized." Chen's expression shifts from interrogation mode to something more complex. "Mrs. Weimer, what are you talking about?" "The Toronto job isn't real," Sarah says, her voice now steady and clear. "Jacob's been moving money offshore for months. The custody hearing on Friday isn't about what's best for Tommy. It's Jacob's last chance to get legal guardianship before he disappears with my son forever." She reaches into her purse and pulls out a folder thick with documents. "Bank transfers, correspondence with immigration lawyers, a lease on an apartment in Montreal that starts next week." Her hands shake slightly as she spreads the papers across the child-sized table. "I hired a private investigator 2 months ago when I realized what he was planning. I examined the documents, my heart sinking as the scope of Jacob's deception becomes clear. Offshore accounts, forged employment letters, even preliminary paperwork for changing Tommy's identity. This isn't a custody dispute. It's an international kidnapping plot using the legal system as cover." "Why didn't you take this to the police?" Chen asks. "Because Jacob's lawyer convinced the court I'm mentally unstable." Sarah's voice cracks with frustration. "Every time I tried to present evidence, they said it was paranoid delusions brought on by depression and custody anxiety. His legal team painted me as an unfit mother who would say anything to keep her ex-husband from exercising his parental rights. I think about Attorney Webb's aggressive defense of the family's interests and his obvious fear when Lila read his voice. How much did Webb know about Jacob's plans? Everything." Sarah's voice hardens. "He's been helping coordinate the legal and financial aspects. The custody hearing on Friday was supposed to be a formality, give Jacob emergency guardianship based on my instability, then disappear before anyone could challenge the ruling. Lila, who's been listening with that focused intensity she brings to all voice analysis, suddenly speaks up. She's telling the truth about all of it, but—" She pauses, tilting her head as if trying to isolate a specific frequency. "There's something else, something that scares her more than losing custody." "What?" I ask. Lila looks directly at Sarah. "You think they'll hurt Tommy if they can't take him legally?" The statement lands like a physical blow. Sarah's careful composure crumbles completely, and she buries her face in her hands as sobs rack her small frame. "He said," she struggles to speak through tears, "Jacob said if I kept fighting the custody arrangement, if I kept trying to poison Tommy against him, he'd make sure I never saw my son again. And when I found out about the money transfers, the fake documents," she looks up with red-rimmed eyes, "I realized he meant it literally." Chen and I exchange glances, both of us recognizing the shift from domestic dispute to something much darker. International child trafficking operations often begin with seemingly legitimate custody battles, using legal proceedings to establish jurisdiction before disappearing into countries with limited extradition agreements. "Sarah," I say gently, "we need to know where Tommy is so we can protect him properly. You can't protect him." Her voice carries the flat certainty of someone who's explored every option and found them all inadequate. Jacob has money, connections, and legal representation that can tie up any investigation for months. By the time the system admits I was right, Tommy will be gone forever. "Then we don't go through the system," I tell her. Both Chen and Sarah's lawyer start to object, but I hold up a hand. Sometimes protecting children requires working outside official channels. Sometimes the law serves the criminals better than it serves the victims. I'm thinking about Emma as I speak, remembering how the legal system failed to hold anyone accountable for the accident that took her life. How the investigation was closed with a finding of driver error because it was easier than admitting the intersection was poorly designed and the city was liable. How justice became a bureaucratic process that prioritized closure over truth. "Where is Tommy?" I ask again. Sarah looks at her lawyer, who shakes her head emphatically. Then she looks at Chen, who represents the same legal system that's failed to protect her son. Finally, she looks at Lila, the 10-year-old girl whose extraordinary gift has unraveled a conspiracy that fooled everyone else. "My sister's cabin in Pinewood," she says quietly, "about 2 hours north of here. Tommy thinks we're having an early camping trip while I figure out what to do next." Chen is already reaching for her radio to coordinate with local authorities, but I stop her. "Wait. If we go in with sirens and badges, Jacob's legal team will claim Sarah is mentally unstable and dangerous. They'll use this to justify emergency custody transfer and accelerate their timeline. So what do you suggest?" I look at the evidence spread across the table. Bank transfers, fake documents, correspondence that reveals a criminal conspiracy hiding behind family court proceedings. We need irrefutable proof of Jacob's fraud before we bring Tommy back. Evidence so clear that even corrupt lawyers can't explain it away. Sarah's lawyer speaks up for the first time since her client started confessing. "If you're suggesting we investigate my client's ex-husband without proper warrants or legal authority, I'm suggesting we save a child from being trafficked to another country," I interrupt. "Everything else is paperwork." Lila tugs on my sleeve again, and I lean down so she can whisper in my ear. "There's someone else, someone who's been listening to our conversation who shouldn't be here." I straighten up, my hand instinctively moving toward the concealed weapon I haven't had to draw in 3 years. "Where?" "Outside, by the window near the reading corner." Their breathing changed when Mrs. Weimer mentioned the cabin. Chen draws her service weapon and moves toward the window, but whoever was listening has already vanished into the pre-dawn darkness. We're left with the uncomfortable knowledge that Tommy's location is no longer secret, and Sarah's desperate plan to protect her son has just become infinitely more dangerous. "We need to get to Pinewood," I tell Chen. "Now." "Ray, I can't authorize." "Then don't authorize it. I'm going as a private citizen to check on the welfare of a child who may be in danger." I turn to Sarah. "You're coming with me to make sure Tommy knows he's safe." Her lawyer starts to object again, but Sarah cuts her off. "Amanda, if something happens to Tommy because we worried more about legal procedures than his safety, I'll never forgive myself. Or you." Chen holsters her weapon but doesn't look happy about the situation. "If this goes sideways, Ray—" "It already went sideways," I point out. "We're just trying to catch up." As we prepare to leave, Lila approaches Sarah with that direct gaze that makes her seem older than her years. "Mrs. Weimer, when you took Tommy yesterday, you were afraid, but not sorry. That's how I knew you were trying to protect him instead of hurt him." Sarah kneels down to Lila's eye level, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for listening when no one else would. Sometimes the truth is quiet, Lila replies, but it's always there if you know how to hear it. The drive to Pinewood takes us through the kind of rural darkness that makes civilization feel like a temporary interruption in an otherwise wild world. Sarah sits in the passenger seat of my old sedan, giving directions in a voice that's grown steadier as we've gotten farther from the city and closer to her son. In the rearview mirror, I can see Chen following in her patrol car, probably running through the departmental disciplinary procedures she'll face if this unauthorized operation goes badly. Turn left at the next road, Sarah says, pointing toward a gap in the trees that's barely wide enough for a single vehicle. The cabin's about a mile down this trail. The path is more dirt than road, forcing me to slow down as we navigate ruts and fallen branches by headlight. Ancient pines tower on both sides, their branches creating a canopy so thick that even dawn light struggles to penetrate. It's the kind of place where people go to disappear from the modern world, or where modern troubles follow them despite their best efforts to escape. Sarah, I say as we bounce through another pothole, I need you to understand that this situation is more dangerous than you originally thought. Jacob isn't just planning to take Tommy away. He's involved with people who have resources and connections that go way beyond small-town custody battles. What do you mean? Webb's reaction when Lila analyzed his voice. The way he knew exactly how to discredit her testimony. The sophisticated financial planning and document forgery. I navigate around a fallen log. This isn't amateur hour. Jacob's connected to an organization that specializes in making children disappear through legal channels. Sarah's face goes pale in the dashboard light. You think there are other families going through this? I think Tommy's case is part of a larger pattern, and I think we're not the only ones who figured out where he is. As if summoned by my words, headlights appear in the rearview mirror. Not Chen's patrol car, which is still visible further back, but a dark sedan moving too fast for the rough terrain. The driver seems familiar with this route, taking curves and obstacles with practiced ease that suggests this isn't their first trip to the cabin. Company, I tell Sarah, reaching for my phone to call Chen. But before I can dial, the sedan accelerates and rams into the back of my car with enough force to send us sliding toward the trees. I fight to maintain control as branches scrape against the windows and Sarah grabs the dashboard to keep from being thrown around the cabin. Hold on, I tell her, downshifting and hitting the gas to pull ahead of our pursuer. The sedan tries to ram us again, but I've been in enough high-speed chases to know that heavier vehicles have advantages on narrow roads. I let them close the distance, then slam on the brakes at the last second. The sedan tries to stop but overshoots, sliding sideways into a drainage ditch with a satisfying crunch of metal against stone. In the sudden silence that follows, I can hear voices from the disabled vehicle. Angry voices speaking in the clipped tones of people accustomed to having their plans work smoothly. Sarah and I sit in the darkness, listening to our pursuers struggle with a car that's definitely not going anywhere without a tow truck. How did they know? Sarah whispers. Someone was listening when you told us about the cabin. Either they followed us or... I trail off as a worse possibility occurs to me. Sarah, who else knows about this place? Just my sister and... Her voice grows small. Tommy's school has emergency contact information. They have the cabin listed as an alternate location where I can be reached. Who has access to school records? Parents, teachers, the principal. She stops, understanding dawning on her face. And legal representatives involved in custody cases. Webb. The aggressive attorney who appeared at the daycare with convenient timing and obvious fear when Lila read his voice. Who insisted Tommy's disappearance was just a family matter and pushed hard against involving a child witness whose abilities might reveal inconvenient truths. Chen's patrol car appears around the bend, her headlights illuminating the scene of our automotive encounter. She stops and approaches with her weapon drawn, professional caution overriding whatever friendship might have prompted her to follow us into this legal and literal wilderness. "Everyone okay?" she calls. "Fine," I reply, climbing out of the car to assess the damage. "But we've got bigger problems." Chen examines the disabled sedan, noting the government plates and the sophisticated communication equipment visible through the cracked windshield. "This isn't Jacob Weimer's car." "No," I agree, recognizing the implications. "This is federal." The voices from the sedan have gone quiet, but I can see movement inside as the occupants apparently debate their options. Official vehicles following unauthorized investigations into federal child trafficking operations suggests we've wandered into territory where local law enforcement authority becomes meaningless and constitutional protections become negotiable. "Chen," I say quietly, "you need to call for backup. Real backup, not just more local cops." "What kind of backup?" "The kind that investigates corruption in family courts and child protective services, the kind that has jurisdiction over organized trafficking operations." I look toward the cabin, barely visible through the trees ahead. "The kind that can protect a little boy from people who make children disappear legally." But even as I speak, I know we're running out of time. Tommy is less than a mile ahead, probably asleep in a cabin bed while his mother and a strange private investigator debate his future in the woods outside. Behind us, federal agents, corrupt or otherwise, are calling for reinforcements that will arrive with more resources and authority than a small-town police department can match. And somewhere in between, a 10-year-old girl with an extraordinary gift sits in a daycare center, listening to voices that tell truths the adult world isn't ready to hear. "We go get Tommy," I tell Sarah and Chen. "We bring him back safely, and then we let people smarter than me figure out how to prosecute a conspiracy that reaches into federal agencies and family courts." "Ray," Chen says carefully, "what if the people in that sedan are the good guys? What if we're interfering with a legitimate operation?" I think about Lila's voice analysis of Webb's fear, about Sarah's evidence of Jacob's financial crimes, about the sophisticated organization required to pull off international child trafficking through family court proceedings. Then they'll have to explain why they're so interested in silencing a 10-year-old girl who can hear lies in people's voices, I say, and they'll have to do it under oath in open court with media attention. The walk to the cabin takes 10 minutes through forest that grows denser and darker with each step. Sarah leads the way with the confidence of someone who's made this trip many times, while Chen and I follow with the caution of people who expect trouble to emerge from behind every tree. The silence is broken only by the sound of our footsteps on fallen leaves and the distant rumble of vehicles approaching on the dirt road behind us. The cabin appears suddenly through a gap in the trees, a small log structure with a stone chimney and windows that glow with warm yellow light. Smoke rises from the chimney, and I can see the silhouette of a woman moving around inside, probably Sarah's sister preparing breakfast for a nephew who thinks he's on an adventure camping trip. "Tommy!" Sarah calls as we approach the front door. The door opens immediately, revealing a woman who looks like Sarah but with less stress and more sleep. Behind her, a small boy appears in dinosaur pajamas, his face lighting up when he sees his mother. "Mommy!" Tommy runs towards Sarah, who scoops him up in the kind of fierce hug that speaks to the terror she's been carrying for the past day. "Hey, buddy," Sarah whispers into his hair. "Mommy's here." Tommy pulls back to look at her face with the serious expression children get when they sense adult emotions they don't understand. "Are we in trouble?" "Aunt Lisa said we might have to go home early." "Not trouble," Sarah tells him, "but we do need to go home and fix some things." I watch this reunion with the bittersweet awareness that comes from remembering similar moments with Emma, The way children trust adults to solve problems they can't comprehend, the weight of responsibility that comes with being someone's entire world. Tommy doesn't know that his father planned to kidnap him, that his mother committed a crime to save him, or that federal agents are currently coordinating his recapture less than a mile away. He just knows his mommy is here, and that's enough to make him feel safe. Chen appears beside me, her radio crackling with updates from the sedan crew. They're requesting backup and claiming we're interfering with a federal operation, she reports quietly. What kind of operation? Child recovery. They have paperwork authorizing them to take custody of Tommy Weimer and return him to his legal guardian. Jacob? Emergency custody was granted 2 hours ago based on evidence that the mother represents an immediate danger to the child. Chen shows me her phone, where she's received a digital copy of the court order. Signed by Judge Harrison at 4 a.m., I study the paperwork, noting the official seals and legal language that transforms Sarah's desperate attempt to protect her son into criminal child endangerment. The timing is perfect. Filed after Sarah's location was discovered, but before she could present evidence of Jacob's trafficking operation. Judge Harrison, I say, isn't he the one who's been handling the Weimer custody case? For the past 6 months. And according to this order, he's determined that Sarah Weimer's mental instability and criminal behavior, kidnapping her own son, justifies immediate transfer of custody to the father. The system moves with terrifying efficiency when it serves the interests of people with resources and connections. Sarah's evidence of Jacob's financial crimes becomes irrelevant when she's branded a kidnapper. Her desperate attempt to protect Tommy becomes proof that she's an unfit mother. And Lila's extraordinary testimony about voice analysis becomes the fantasy of a child whose mother has been coaching her to support delusional accusations. We're losing, I tell Chen. Not yet. She shows me another message on her phone. I contacted the FBI field office in Albany. They're sending agents to investigate the trafficking allegations, but they need time to coordinate with international authorities. How much time? 12 to 18 hours. I look at Tommy, who's now showing his mother and aunt a collection of pine cones he gathered yesterday while exploring the woods around the cabin. 12 hours might as well be 12 years when federal agents with emergency custody orders are less than a mile away and closing fast. Chen, I say quietly, I need you to take Tommy and Sarah and drive back toward town. Use back roads. Avoid the main highway. Get them to the FBI field office in Albany and don't stop for anyone who doesn't have federal identification. What about you? I'm going to buy you time. She starts to object, but the sound of vehicles approaching through the forest cuts off any argument. Multiple engines, moving slowly but steadily toward the cabin with the methodical precision of people who have overwhelming advantages and don't need to hurry. Go, I tell her. Now! Sarah overhears enough of our conversation to understand the urgency. She scoops up Tommy and follows Chen toward a back trail that leads deeper into the woods, trusting a stranger to protect her son because all the official protections have failed. Where are we going? Tommy asks as they disappear into the trees. On another adventure, Sarah tells him, a really important one. I remain at the cabin, checking my service weapon and thinking about the 15 years I've spent trying to save other people's children from the kind of tragedy that took Emma. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes good people with authority and resources arrive in time to prevent catastrophe. But sometimes you have to stand in the woods alone, facing people who hide criminal enterprises behind legal documents and federal authority, trusting that the truth will matter more than the paperwork when everything is finally sorted out. The vehicles break through the tree line as dawn begins to filter through the canopy. 3 black SUVs with government plates and the kind of tactical equipment that suggests their occupants take their authority very seriously. Men in expensive suits emerge, their movements coordinated and professional, their weapons visible but not drawn. The man who approaches the cabin has the bearing of someone accustomed to having his commands followed without question. He identifies himself as Agent Morrison, FBI Child Recovery Unit, and presents credentials that look authentic, and probably are. "Mr. Marshall," he says, apparently already knowing who I am. "We're here to recover a kidnapped child and return him to his legal guardian. I understand you've been assisting in an unauthorized investigation that's interfered with our operation. I've been trying to protect a child from being trafficked to another country," I reply. But I guess we define our jobs differently. Morrison's expression doesn't change, but I catch something in his posture that suggests Lila's voice analysis training might be useful even without superhuman hearing. He's confident in his authority, but there's something else. The careful control of someone who's playing a role rather than acting from conviction. "Mr. Marshall, you're interfering with a federal investigation. The child's mother has been charged with kidnapping, and we have emergency custody orders authorizing his immediate return to protective services. What about the evidence of the father's trafficking operation? The financial crimes, the forged documents, the plan to disappear with Tommy to another country? What evidence?" Morrison's response comes too quickly, with the kind of professional dismissal that suggests he's had this conversation before. "We've found no credible evidence of trafficking. The mother's accusations appear to be delusional thinking brought on by custody anxiety and possible mental illness. It's exactly what Sarah predicted. Every piece of evidence reframed as symptom, every attempt to protect Tommy reinterpreted as criminal behavior. The system protects itself by discrediting anyone who challenges its conclusions, especially desperate mothers and broken-down private investigators with more experience than authority. Where's the child, Mr. Marshall? I think about Tommy in his dinosaur pajamas, trusting adults to solve problems he can't understand. About Sarah's evidence of Jacob's crimes, dismissed as delusion. About Lila's extraordinary gift, reduced to the fantasy of an over-imaginative child. Safe, I tell Morrison. He's safe. From his own father? Mr. Marshall, Jacob Weimer is a respected businessman with no criminal record and legal custody rights affirmed by the court system. Sarah Weimer is a mentally unstable woman who kidnapped her own child and has recruited you to enable her criminal behavior. And Attorney Webb? What's his role in this respectable custody arrangement? Morrison's expression shifts slightly. So briefly it might have been imagination, but I've spent 30 years reading faces in crisis situations. Mr. Webb is legal counsel for the family. His involvement is entirely appropriate. Even when he's coordinating international money transfers and document forgery? I'm not going to debate conspiracy theories with you, Mr. Marshall. Morrison signals to his team, who begin moving toward the cabin with tactical precision. You can either tell us where the child is voluntarily, or we can search every building and vehicle in this area until we find him. But they won't find Tommy, because Chen and Sarah are already miles away on back roads that don't appear on federal GPS systems. And by the time Morrison realizes his quarry has escaped, the FBI field office in Albany will have enough evidence to begin asking uncomfortable questions about trafficking operations hiding behind family court proceedings. Search all you want, I tell him. But you might want to contact your superiors first, because in about 6 hours, this case is going to be all over the national news, and someone's going to have to explain why federal agents were so eager to return a child to a man who's been moving money offshore and planning to disappear. Morrison's confident demeanor cracks slightly, revealing something that might be concern or might be recognition that his carefully orchestrated operation has encountered an unexpected complication. What are you talking about? Lila Cross, the 10-year-old girl whose voice analysis exposed this conspiracy. She's given interviews to 3 major news networks about how federal agents tried to silence a child witness who could identify criminal activity. I'm bluffing, but Morrison doesn't know that. Amazing what happens when a kid with extraordinary abilities becomes a media sensation. The lie lands with satisfying impact. Morrison reaches for his phone, probably calling superiors who are about to discover that their covert operation has become a public relations nightmare. Because whatever resources criminal conspiracies might have, they generally prefer to operate outside media attention. "Mr. Marshall," Morrison says after a brief heated conversation, "you've made a serious mistake." "Probably," I agree, "but not the kind that keeps me awake at night." The federal agents withdraw as efficiently as they arrived, leaving me alone at the cabin with the growing certainty that Tommy Weimer is safe. But the larger conspiracy remains intact. Sarah's evidence might expose Jacob's financial crimes, but the system that enabled his planned trafficking will adapt and continue targeting other families. I think about Lila sitting in the daycare center with her extraordinary gift for hearing truth in human voices. She solved this case by listening to what adults missed, but her abilities also make her a target for people who prefer their crimes to remain undetected. Some gifts are dangerous in a world that profits from lies. My phone buzzes with a text from Chen. "Package delivered safely. Recipients very interested in contents. More news at 11. Tommy is with federal investigators who specialize in trafficking cases. Sarah's evidence is being analyzed by people with authority to prosecute international financial crimes. And somewhere in Millbrook, a 10-year-old girl is probably drawing pictures of the adventure she helped create with nothing but her extraordinary ears and the courage to speak truth when adults preferred lies. I drive back toward town as the sun rises over a landscape that looks exactly the same as yesterday, but feels fundamentally different. Another case closed, another child saved from the kind of tragedy that takes decades to heal from. But the larger questions remain unanswered. How many other children are targets of similar operations? How many other families are fighting systems designed to protect criminals instead of victims? How many other extraordinary children are being silenced because their gifts threaten powerful interests? The radio announces breaking news about federal investigations into child trafficking operations using family court proceedings. Arrests have been made, accounts have been frozen, and congressional hearings are being scheduled to examine systematic corruption in child protective services. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes good people with authority and resources arrive in time to prevent catastrophe. Sometimes the truth matters more than paperwork when everything is finally sorted out. But it usually takes a 10-year-old girl with impossible gifts to show the way.